The Samata judgment was delivered by the Supreme Court of India on July 11th of 1997. It should be mentioned here that there are only two judgments in the last century which were on behalf of tribal or indigenous populations around the world. One was Samata in India and the second was Mabo case in Australia. The Mabo case got overturned, so Samata still remains as the only case or judgment in favor of tribal people or indigenous people around the world in the last century. Now let me give you very briefly what the whole judgment was about. In the Constitution of India, we have special provisions called the 5th Schedule and the 6th Schedule, which deal with the tribal populations. In India, indigenous people are called as tribal populations as per the Constitution and as per the order of the President of India. Now, the 6th Schedule deals with the tribal populations of the northeast in India, which is Meghalaya, Mizoram, Assam and other places. The 5th Schedule deals with about 10 central Indian tribal belt states, and we are here concerned about the 5th Schedule. So under the 5th Schedule, there are various laws that were promulgated to protect land and prevent money lending and various things whose jurisprudence goes back to the pre-independence or to the British times. Therefore, there were these special provisions, and it should also be mentioned that the tribal populations are the only one group that has been mentioned very specifically in the Constitution, and there are so many provisions for protection of their land and resources, their identity, culture, etc. Now, this being the background, one state in which I work, called the state of Andhra Pradesh, had issued mining leases from 1958 till 1984 in quote-unquote scheduled areas, and the tribal communities living there were very troubled by this particular thing since 1950s. And there's also a presence of a huge limestone caves which are about 400 million years old, and Paleolithic man had stayed here. So this being the case, the tribal communities, who were very, very upset with this for a long time, approached us. So Samata conducted its own little bit of research and visited the areas. These are called the Bora Caves in Visakhapatnam district in Andhra Pradesh. And after our initial investigation and a little bit of research, we understood that there was a legal issue here. The leases that were given by the government of Andhra Pradesh, the state government, were not valid according to our analysis, not valid as per the Andhra Pradesh Land Transfer Regulation Act of 1959. So we approached the High Court, and the High Court immediately gave us a stay order, and the mining came to a halt in 93 July. Soon after this mining, about 5 mining companies were there, and the mining came to a halt. Naturally, the companies were upset, so they paid the local police, and me and many of our team members were actually taken into illegal custody for a period of 7 to 8 days, and finally released after realizing that we are not Naxalites or left-wing extremists. So when we went to the court, so we explained to them, and they finally left us. That is like a small incident. That made us do a lot more work, and we realized there were more leases in the same area, and we went to the court again. And cutting a long story short, in 1995 we lost in the High Court, and we had to rush to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court in 2 years delivered a judgment which actually agreed with our view, which says that the state government has no right to lease lands in scheduled areas to other than tribal or indigenous people. So therefore, the leases given from 1958 stand cancelled, and the land that belongs to the people, the authorities were ordered to give them the title deeds for the cultivation that they have been doing. Along with that, the court also said that if there is any business activity in scheduled areas, the 20% from the net profit has to be spent for local area development. Now, you can say that the court was very sensitive to these issues and also made very clear judgments, and so therefore since 1997, so the Samata judgment came as a big roadblock for the central government way back in 2001, when they had a disinvestment ministry and their whole job was to disinvest in the state public sector units. Since then it has faced a lot of opposition, though in Andhra Pradesh, the state where the judgment applies very perfectly, the state government cannot really hoodwink the law, and so therefore they are trying to find ways of how to circumvent this judgment. There was also a move around 2001 when the judgment, there was a secret note to kind of see how the basis for the Samata judgment can be removed, but popular protests and exposure by media in that time, the central government withdrew this secret note and the Samata judgment still remains. However, the interpretation of the Samata judgment by various state governments, as you see, this is a pro-tribal, pro-indigenous judgment, and the whole system is not actually pro-tribal, and so the Samata judgment faces a lot of pressure or opposition from state and the industries, whereas the communities all over tribal India want the Samata judgment to be implemented. So it is now left for the younger generation of tribal youth and the leaders to actually take up the issue of whether the resources in tribal areas belong to them or belong to everybody. If so, are they not the first, the people who have to first benefit from these minerals or resources, and then the rest of the country can benefit from this. So this is something, the discourse is started now in India with all the educated tribal youth coming forward and social media helping out in this process. So it's got to be seen in future as to how the famous or a landmark judgment that came in 1997 would show the way for the future. Thank you.
Yeah.